Hello, and welcome to this episode of Rule of Carnage. This is where we talk about designing better miniatures games, but at the moment we're talking about the year that has gone by and the year that is yet to come, for it is the time of year which people do that as a general rule. We've
We're
spoken over the
full,
last.
we're full of food, we're full of drink, and we are relaxing on the sofa of YouTube, thinking about all the terrible things we've done this year and what
Yes.
terrible things we will do next year.
Exactly. Very full of drink. We spent the last few conversations talking about the games we've played and the books we've read over the last year that have influenced our designs and our thinking. And because by the time you watch this, it will be close to the year 2025. We thought we'd talk a little bit about the sorts of things that we're looking forward to, games we're interested in seeing popping up, coming to fruition,
Hmm.
and the future generally. So we were sort of talking about this bit before we sort of started the record, and I realised that a lot of the games that I'm looking forward to getting around to playing are either digital or board games.
Mm.
And I think that's partly because of like the digital thing, because Steam is a excellent sort of platform for wish listing, and it
This
lets
is a
you know.
demanding mistress.
Well, it lets you know things like so far ahead, and you can make a wish
Mm.
list that has coming soons, and early access and all those sorts of things. And board games, because while I don't have a pile of opportunity for minis painting,
Mm.
I do have quite the pile of opportunity for board games, because
Mm.
I can paint a mini at like half past 12 at night whilst listening to a podcast. I can't really play a multiplayer board game at that point.
Indeed.
um so yeah, so I thought I'd talk about, we'll both talk about the things that are coming up, but mine are mainly sort of digital and board games, I think.
Hmm.
So I was looking through. So there's a game coming up. I mean, it's available in early access, but I don't like getting digital games in early access.
Mm.
Which is a Book of Travels. Now
Oh
that's
yeah.
listed as a tiny multiplayer online RPG, as opposed to a massive multiplayer
Very good. Very
online
good.
RPG. So the whole idea of it is that you will occasionally come across other human beings, but incredibly rarely, like intentionally incredibly rarely, and that the experience of meeting them will therefore be in some way more valuable and more sort of important and impactful, rather than like, you know, I've been playing Elder Scrolls Online, and every time you go into a town, there's just hoof loads of like chosen ones like running all around the town, and every shop the vendor has to be able to talk to 90 people at once, because you're literally just stacked on top of each other talking to the vendor through each other's faces. And so, the idea of an RPG which willfully limits the number of other human beings you can come into contact with in order to sort of preserve the interest of it is like really caught my imagination. And I've been
Mm.
looking forward to that one coming out of early access, so that I can pick it up.
Hmm.
Um, I know, yeah, I noticed, like I say, a lot of the things that I've got sort of listed, like uh that I'm looking forward to. There's a strong nostalgia hit, I think, on my list. So Speedball has got
Oh really?
a brand new edition that's currently early access.
Nice.
And hours hours of playing Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe as
Mm.
a teenager. I hope they still got the ice cream seller in there. There's a Blade Runner 2033 coming up. There's a new version of Fable. I don't know if Fable
Mm.
was one that impacted you when it came out.
I did play the first one. I can't remember if I played the sequel, but I remember enjoying the first one.
I definitely
Like
played both.
cartoony, you can be good, you can be evil, a lot of porking people.
Yes, all of those things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they're doing a new Fable 1, which I'm interested in seeing coming out. And there's a Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era. So it's Heroes of Might and Magic new, but intentionally meant to be like the old Heroes of Might and Magic 1, 2, or 3. Have
Oh.
that look, but much slicker.
Oh, so here you're allowing us to drag it back to miniature games. Have you seen the Heroes of Might and Magic miniature game that's been announced by Archon Studios? I think they're called.
I have seen it announced, and so okay. So one of the games that you mentioned prior to the record of looking forward to, and we'll talk about in a second, is Strontium Dog,
Mm,
the 2000D, and I think this ties into the Heroes of Might and Magic miniatures game, and my attitude to the 2000 AD miniatures games, which there are things where one version of the experience is so precious that the idea of engaging with it in a new medium is kind of scary.
mm,
And it's like, the old Heroes of Might and Magic games, like loom large in my youth.
mm.
And the idea of there being a miniature, a tabletop version of it is like, it's not going to be the same. It could be great. It could be really really brilliant. It could be a really good game, but it won't be the same. And so I won't give a shit that it's really really good.
Yeah,
It
you'll like reject its premise.
Yeah, and it's like the new to the 2000 AD minis game that I'm happy
Yeah,
to play.
the range of from Warlord. Yeah.
Yeah. The Warlord range. And you were saying you're looking for you want to play the Strontium Dog one.
Yeah, so I got a set of the Strontium Dog one, and I read the rule book, and I thought that the rule system looks really tidy, and there's a nice little campaign system that goes with it, and it was just an excuse to go back and read like a 2000 AD comic that I knew nothing about, and now knowing that it's like it's sort of a combination of Wild West and dimension jumping nonsense, and then seeing like lots of silliness being reflected in the rules. So yeah, I'm interested to get that on the table, partly because like um Andy Chambers and Gav Thorpe have worked on that system now like multiple times for all of these different Warlord games, and so like Strontium's Dog not the first one, and this is like it's interesting to see like okay, this is a system that has been worked on a fair bit by some experienced people. Like let's see what they do with a narrative skirmish system when they've been given enough leverage to like work on it not just for multiple years but for multiple iterations as well. So yeah, there's a number of reasons why I'm interested in playing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to play it.
And I don't have the baggage that you have associated with the property. So for me, it'll just be like, is it a sort of space cowboy game? Hooray!
Well, I'm curious, like in relation to sort of what we were saying about like 7TV,
Mm,
and the idea of like generic rule systems being applied to different universes. Because
mm.
it's very true what you're saying there, like that Strontium Dog, and particularly the Johnny Alpha Strontium Dog, is like a sort of uh, sci-fi western to some degree, and bits of Judge Dredd are a bit of a sort of sci-fi western,
Yeah.
but a lot of Judge Dredd is Dirty Harry, and I think they've got like Rogue.
Yeah, and then some of it, or like maybe the Anderson stuff is more like cop procedural stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think they've got like Rogue Trooper. I think is somewhere in there, and Rogue Trooper is a whole other sort of
Hmm.
war film.
Yeah, and like one of the core mechanics is these like decks of cards that provide a lot of the flavor. And so I'm interested to see in practice because like 7TV had a similar deck of cards to try and introduce flavor. Be
Hmm.
interested to see how effective this particular system leverages that. Like, well, we got the core resolution mechanics, but then all of the like genre beats and kind of like IP texture is coming out through these like silly event cards that you've got access to.
Yeah, like so. As I understand the Warlord 2000 AD system, it's a sort of time twister thing where you can have Slain and Judge Dredd in the same world fighting at the same time, which is
I don't know if that doesn't seem to be how the product is sold. It's sold as if you're supposed to just do the thing in the comic strip and not
okay.
mess about with it. Like that specific idea is definitely in the Martin Wallace board game. There's like a Wildlands
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
yeah.
2000 AD board game that I just took receipt of because I wanted to see how that Wildlands system worked. That's very much like cram all the IPs in. Let's have a big old, mashup thing. But no, I think the Strontium Dog one is quite isolated from the Judge Dredd one.
I'm curious to see how it gets the flavor of
Mm.
the Strontium Dogs into a tabletop game system that is also then meant to be able to get the flavor of Judge Dredd.
Yeah, that's it. That's what's interesting, I think.
Yeah, cool. That should be good fun.
Yeah, so other miniature games that I am looking forward to playing. So I have got the Curse Breaker Kickstarter on its way at some point in the next couple of months. That's Relic Blade Sean's new sorceress combat game. Um, I've got a friend who I gave my regular 40k dad player. I gave him a box of Relic Blade miniatures, which are also you can use them in Cursebreaker as well. So I'm hoping at some point to get a game of Relic Blade because I haven't played that for a couple of years and I really like that game. So I want to play some more, but maybe the arrival of the Cursebreaker Kickstarter will be the excuse to play that. I think that Sean's a good game designer and that his approach to games design is pretty intriguing. So I'm interested to see what he's done with this system. It's not exactly, but it's like it's a response to the game that we worked on together with Mystic Skies. Like it's sort of his sort of response to that experience working together. So I'm super curious to see how Cursebreaker how it plays out. It's got some intriguing kind of um, tactical elements where you've got some certainty in the system. It's about what the other player decides to choose to do or not do, and I'm curious to see how all that folds out on the table.
Cool.
Yeah. The other miniature game that I've had printed out for a while and I haven't got to the table, but I'm super intrigued to do so. I have been wanting to since the summer. Is Necropolis, or it was originally called Necropolis 28 when that designer was still very much in the I better put a 28 on it. I think he's dropped it now. Um, I am really intrigued by that game's atmosphere, and the game was designed to play on an 18-inch square board, which was intended to be like a tournament chess size board. Um, I haven't got a chance to put it on the table even solo yet, but I'm intrigued by the vibe of it, and I that's the sort of thing that I'll play with our mate Rufus, who will invent fun out of any bits of sticks that you leave lying around. But I'm super interested to see Necropolis and how that plays out.
Um, yeah, a lot of my games I'm looking forward to hopefully getting to the tabletop, as I say, going to be board games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get Dorf Romantic back to the table. I've got a couple of semi-legacy like games
Mm.
hanging around that I really enjoy, but I've not been able to get to the tabletop enough. So I've got Arania Knizia as my city, sitting um a few games through into that campaign. I've got Dorf Romantic a few games through, but sort of not progressed through it. I'd love to get sort of more time to get those to the tabletop. I'm already banking games that I think will be good to play with my son when he gets old
Ah,
enough to start playing games. And it's
my daughter Emily this evening said, "Can we play Hero Quest?" And her little sister said, "No, I don't want to play it." And she was like, "Oh, I really want to play Hero Quest." And I was like, "I have succeeded as a father." Back of the net.
so like and these these ones are like 5 to 8 years away at this point. But
A man has to dream. He
I've
has to
got
have his hopes.
the Robin. I ordered the Robin Hood. I think it's a Robin Hood Adventures in Sherwood game
Oh yeah.
because it was recommended for like the mechanics of the way it works. So it's got
Hmm.
a thing where like you've got a series of meeples that have like trailing shadows behind them, and you move by making a chain of these meeples by like chaining their shadows like next to each other, and
Ooh.
different characters get to chain more meeples, and then that means like if you do the long meeple, you can go further, but you can't really steer, and etc. etc.
Mm.
I got it and I cracked the book, and there is a beautiful, like, the campaign book is like a proper hardback leather bound, and I just opened the box. And I was just like, Jesus, I know it's. I think it's a Ravensburger, and their production levels are high. But I opened the box. And I was just like, oh God, this is so beautiful. This is a thing of such loveliness. And so that one's
Unnecessary luxury.
just, yeah, really lovely. That and a RPG in a box called What's Next are very much on the shelf, likely to have to wait a few years until my youngster is of age to engage with them. But I'd love to get them to the tabletop next year.
Yes, I have a similarly. I'm not sure I can remember the name of it without getting behind the camera and digging it out. But I got a copy of a ghost hunting role playing game for kids, which is like it's a role playing game, but it has like a ghost hunter's sort of book, and you get like sheets of stickers, and as you sort of go through the adventure and find different stickers, then it's like a kind of Pokemon collection thing where as you find the things, you get a physical sticker to put in your like Ghost Watchers book. So lovely.
As usual, I've got like a list of SDG. I picked up Breed earlier in the
Bless you.
year, and I'd like to get that to the tabletop. And I've got a copy of Mississippi Queen and the expansion that's been sitting there for a little while because it's a 3-player minimum. And
Mm.
if there's a piece of advice I could give is don't make a game that has a 3 or 4-player minimum, because it just makes it so much more of a pain to get through just that first learning game, if nothing else, to find out if you actually like it, to play it with a larger group. But those are the SDJs that I would love to get to the table at some point next year. Hopefully,
Have you
I'll.
got any Kickstarters arriving?
No, the most recent Kickstarter I had was actually a digital game. The first digital game Kickstarter that I backed ever arrived this year. A game called I think it's Mika and the Witch's Mountain. As I've mentioned previously on the channel, I quite like cozy video games, and Mika's and the Witch's Mountain was the new game by a designer that had done other cozy games I'd enjoyed, and it's basically Kiki's Delivery Service,
Right.
the game.
Fair
Um,
enough.
and it's sort of interesting playing it because it really made me think about, like, some of my favorite games are these cozy games. So there's like Alba, a Wildlife Adventure, is like one of my favorite games. Like I played in the last like 5 to 10 years, like digital games, and like my playtime clocked for it is maybe 2 hours, if that. And Mika and the Witch's Mountain, I played for all the content. I think it clocked under 4 hours, maybe.
Mm.
Um, but I really love a lot of those very quick. There's a game called A Short Hike, which is
Oh yeah.
a cozy game, a quick game. I think I cried at the end of it, partly because, like, the story happened to hit like against personal things that were happening in the real world, but it was just such a sort of lovely experience of playing through it.
Mm.
Um, I've sort of recently written a blog on the Patreon about the fact that there are these games I really just find fun and lovely and enjoyable and beautiful, and all of them clock like under 4 or 5 hours on my Steam. And there are these games that clock 100+ hours, a lot of which I have much less fond feelings about by the end of it.
Much more mixed feelings.
Yeah, no, it's like I think I finally knocked off Darkest Dungeon. Might have been the start of this year, and I've got a lot of hours clocked on that. And it's like by the end of it, I wasn't enjoying any part of the experience, you know. But it's like I've been playing a lot of Magic the Gathering Arena. I said before we came on the record, and partly because I just leave it running and come back to it when I want to, but partly because I've clocked a lot of hours for it. I've clocked a lot of hours for that game, and a lot of those hours are not particularly enjoyable experience, because it's a game that drags you back rather than one that satisfies you at
And
every
it's
point.
weird because we don't have those tools available to us. Like we've got the ability to inspire people to indulge in hobby and stuff, but like there is no like hooky engagement loop that's really available to an indie developer. Like we can create these expansions or content or whatever, but it's not like it's really tough. Like what I mean to say is it's a battleground for people's attention, and we are fighting with sticks that have maybe been sharpened.
I think the thing of it is, and maybe this is a bit self-aggrandizing, but there are other like game art forms that can get you to play them when you do not like them anymore, when you
Mm.
genuinely dislike the experience, but for various reasons you're sort of chunking through to get to the end of it. And we make games where people actually have to like playing them to play them. You know, if you're going to make a minis game that's going to actually get people to the tabletop, they've got to actually enjoy what they're doing. But it's like the book I mentioned, like
Maybe I think there's a big social component there where like
well, yeah, that
I've played a
possibly.
fair amount of 10th edition 40k this year, and I haven't enjoyed every moment of that, but I have enjoyed spending time with friends. So
Well, we have the social experience. We have like getting people pot committed, where they're like, I'm not really enjoying this game, but oh my goodness, I spent a lot of money on the miniatures,
yeah. There's
so
that.
I may as well keep turning up to the club and
It's
playing.
less available to the indie developer, but yes, I agree.
Yeah, but no, certainly there are those. There have been digital games where I've been like, well, I'm playing it now. I'll chunk through it. And so
Mm.
in relation to digital games that are maybe more indie related, I finally got around to playing Disco Elysium,
Oh yeah.
which is quite the sort of overground underground hit. It's like because one of the other games I played Dave the Diver, which is like got a
Hmm.
little controversial because it won an award for like best indie game, and people were like, it's just not an indie game, it came out from like a game design studio but not a big one and it feels indie. And yeah, Disco Elysium I think was very interesting to me, partly because
No spoilers, please, because I've only played the first few hours of it, and I mean to get back to it in a minute.
okay, no, but partly because it made me realize that I think I've reached a personal saturation point on obscure micro fiction moments within games. And I think part of the reason it made me realize that
There
is
is a lot. There is. I was worried about forgetting everything that they told me in that game.
yeah, it's just it doesn't matter. And
Okay, well
it's like
that's good. Maybe I'll approach it with that attitude. It'll be more enjoyable.
it's like it's really good, it's really well written, but my goodness, there's a lot of vague, non-specific microfiction in that game that alludes to a world building that is not necessary to play, and it's just there and you can engage with it or not engage with it. And I was
Mm.
sort of reading through a few bits of it, and I've seen it done really, really, really well. And Disco Elysium is an example of a game that does it really well. And I've also seen it done quite badly. And just playing Disco Elysium, where I was just like, oh, I'm done with this now. I'm done with this. Click, 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 click. Let's just get on with the game, and and just sort of scanning through that sort of stuff and going, yeah, okay, I get the flavor, I get the idea, I get the world. I am done with your goddamn microfiction now. I am not
Right.
needing this
Your
now.
unnecessary, ungameplay related
This
wordage.
sort of flower. I mean, it's interesting
It's
because
not that it's unnecessary. That's incorrect verbiage, but it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's accessing a part of the experience which you decided at that point. Actually, I'm not needing this part of the experience.
Well, it felt like a little while ago. Is this often the case? There are these things that, like, feel really new and interesting and cool, and then you see them, and then you see them again, and then you see them again, and then you see them again, and then after that, you can see them really well done, but you're just like, okay, I get it, I get it. You are this kind of indie thing, and you are referencing your indie ness by doing this particular thing really well and really beautifully, and you're world building with it. But I get it. I get what you're trying to tell me. Thank you. The message has been supplied. Now, just tell me what the is going on, because I just
Right.
want, I
Give me the
just want,
story. I am
I
a
just want the
hungry. I'm
news.
a story hungry animal.
And it's interesting because, like, the first place I experienced.
It reminds me of like when something like X Files goes off the rails, where you're like, I've had all this sort of like background conspiracy stuff, and it's like I'm in or Lost or something. It's like I'm enjoying the flavor. I'm enjoying the flavor. Okay, I'm done with the miscellaneous like undescribed stuff. Like it's okay.
It's like the place I first sort of experienced this. It was in the Alexis Kennedy games, the Fallen London and
Oh yeah.
Cultist Simulator, and he does it masterfully as well. But it's interesting to me because in his book Against World Building, he's very much like, oh, world building that is not in service of the player. It should not be. You shouldn't be doing it.
Which is broadly speaking a thing I can subscribe to.
And the thing is, it's like what that sort of non-specific, vague microfiction does is, gives you the gaps between the panels to fill in as a player and begin to own the world yourself. After a while, it's just exhausting filling in those goddamn gaps, and it's like done occasionally and done masterfully and done in a way that gives you ownership of the game. It's great. After a while, you're just like, I'm just
Tell me what's
plastering
going on. I
cracks.
don't want to write this story. You write it.
Yeah, I'm just this is
Maybe I don't know. I mean, that's interesting because I genuinely don't know because I haven't played enough games like this. But like, it's a similar thing with like with role playing games where it's like, how much of this do I want to have to invent at the table versus how much am I really seeking a more linear media experience? I just happen to be in the wrong medium. So
yeah, I think it's a finely played thing where you want, like, you want the sort of blood in the gutters for people to be able to, like, fill in a gap and have ownership of the story. But what it's like I say, sometimes with these games, I feel like when I'm not filling in the story. I am literally, you've given me a cracked wall, and I am just mindlessly plastering over it, just like,
mm,
blah, blah, okay. There's gaps that need to be filled in, so I will smush across some beige pudge to fill those gaps in, so that I now have a surface I can play on. And yeah, I've reached my personal saturation point with that particular feature of the indie
fair enough.
the indie gaming world. I mean, I was just looking at this and I realized I dot around, I think, digital games even more than I do um physical ones. A couple of one I'd recommend and maybe one I wouldn't. There's a great series called Midnight Scenes. It's like a point and click horror series. Really tiny little point and click games. Most of them have like an hour of play or so. He's just come out of a new one. Played From the Woods this year, and if you like horror, if you like point and click, there I really enjoy them. He comes out with like one every sort of 12 months or so. And a game I think I mentioned before on the channel, which I have mixed feelings about, a game called Songs of the Sojourner,
Mm.
which is a deck builder, which was recommended, to me in relation to emergent narrative and deck builders. So what happens in Songs of the Sojourner is you've got like a little deck of cards, and you go and have conversations with people. And you have the conversation by you lay down a card with like two symbols on it, and they put down a card that connects to those symbols, and you put down a card that connects to the symbols, and so on. And so long as you do a chain of like 5 or 6 cards You successfully complete the conversation, everybody is happy, and you get some sort of reward. You've got a shop, and you have to put the reward in your shop in order to keep a small village alive. That's much for muchness. The point of it is that after each conversation, you add one of the cards from that person into your deck. And at the start of the game, you're at your hometown where everyone speaks in reds and blues, and you have a deck that's great for talking to the people in that town. And then you go to the next town, they talk mostly in reds and blues, but some greens. So you need to work some greens into your deck. And then a few towns over, they talk in like reds, greens, and yellows. And by the time you reach the far end of your journey, you have a deck that's all yellows and greens. And then you go back home and you can't talk to anybody back home because you have grown as a person, and speak about different things that they don't understand anymore. And isn't this a fascinating story about growing and traveling and how you can't go home again?
Mm-hmm.
But your best friend as a child, your like literal next door neighbor, has a card which is just copy the last card played. And if you just fill your deck with copy the last card played, every conversation you just sit there repeating back to the person what they just said, which is exactly what everybody just wants to hear, really.
Obviously.
And you just spam that card and complete the entire game spamming that card constantly. And so the message for me ended up being like, don't listen to people, don't pay attention to them, just repeat back to them what they just said. Everyone is vacuous and mindless, and all they want is themselves reflected back at you.
Classic
Every
psychiatrist technique.
And it was just like all of the beautiful things and lessons that this game is trying to teach me have been hugely undermined by one card they let you get at the start of the game, and then allowed you to replicate it back out by having it repeated in conversations and therefore having it available again. It's like this one card just destroyed the whole message of the game for
the meaning of the game. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the games that I have played this year and I'm looking forward to in the future. Is there anything else you'd like to?
There's a little smattering of role-playing games that I'm interested to see how they work. So I took receipt of Knave Second Edition, Ben Milton's sort of OSR game. I've read it. It looks really good. I'm intrigued about some of the mechanics in it because it doesn't seem like it's a completely new bag of mechanics. It's just like a set of mechanics that are very well considered for a certain kind of game, and I can imagine someone enjoying that, and I'd like to have a little go. And at the other end of the spectrum, I read The Between, and then I read the prequel to it that it came from, Brindlewood Bay, which are like investigative RPGs where the sort of hook of the system is you don't have to make up the story in advance. What you do is, as players, you have to like achieve a threshold of like clue collections, and that allows you to make a guess, and then the dice tells you whether your guess was correct. And then so you've come up with a theory about what's going on, and then the dice will tell you whether your theory is correct or not. It seems like it won't work on paper, but it's super intriguing, and lots of people say it's really good. So I would like to see. That's one of those things where you read it on paper and you're like, nope, I'm going to have to see this in play to see what this is actually like. I can't intuit how this system works. And the other thing what I've got arriving from Kickstarter later, presumably next year, is the Thunder Road RPG,
Right.
where they've taken the deep and luscious lore of the Thunder Road board game and turned that into a role-playing game.
Did we play Thunder Road, the board game? Is that
We played Thunder Road Resurrection or Revolution or whatever the new one is. Vendetta, it's called Vendetta.
Yeah, that did not feel like a world rich enough to build an RPG.
I mean, it's a world made of random dice rolls.
Yeah, that was another one that played out a bit like Snakes and Ladders, where it just felt like dice did the thing, which was
I spent some of today watching the review of Joyride, the Rebellion board game,
All
There was
right,
a
yeah,
shut
yeah.
up and sit down review of it, which at this point in the recording will be a month and a half ago. But it was fun because they sort of positioned it as halfway between Heat, which is very tactical and sort of, very sensible and strategic, and Thunder Road Vendetta, which is very much like, I have drunk lots of beer and there are dice. Woohoo! And he was like, it's right in the middle. And I was delighted to see that many of the comments in the comment section were like, wow, looks like a easy to get into Gaslands board game. I'm into it.
If only somebody were designing a Gaslands board game.
Well, that's the thing, though. I'm not going to design one that looks like Joyride because I don't know. Like, I'm excited to play Joyride. Joyride looks really good, but it is very much like it's a mechanically simplified version of Gaslands. Some might say deliberately. One of the designers is ex Osprey during my time working with them on Gaslands. But anyway, like it. I don't want to make Gaslands as a board. I don't want to make the Gaslands miniatures game as a board game because the Gaslands board game is already the Gaslands board game. Like, I mean, the
Mhm.
Gaslands miniature game is already simple enough, but I don't know. Anyway, so I think that I think that that is an intriguing board game. I'd quite like to play that when it comes out properly in retail. So we should probably get that on the table at some point in 2025.
Or Joyride.
Joyride, I mean.
Yeah, yeah, I think.
Of course,
uh,
we will also, gentle listener, be playing Trench Crusade at some point because we better. It made like $16 billion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at some point.
I know we'll have to struggle through that one to, in journalistic integrity and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've read the rules and I feel like I've already played it. But we'll chunk through that at some point. I
Hmm.
guess people want to know what the take. And then you know what? Like, it looks totally competent.
Burn.
I
Well,
mean,
we shall see.
not.
We shall see. We shall see. Because I don't know. It would be fun to sort of attack it from the Glenn has a look at what the list building stuff is, and Mike sees whether there's anything in terms of like his sort of making pew pew noises enjoyment of games.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I'll have to see because I looked over it. Obviously when it was still in the sort of development stage of things, so I don't know that it's changed significantly. And it's like a lot of the flavor in that seems to have been layered into the list building system.
Mm.
Um, and I'm curious as to where efficiency of force and list building narrative sort of where the rubber meets the road.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think the central system has a massive amount of sort of juice to it, but that doesn't
But
necessarily
then
mean it's not
neither
going to
does
work.
40K. So
As I said before, it, some people said, and I agree. Look, Trench Crusade doesn't particularly have trenches in, and it doesn't particularly seem to have a crusade in it. So what the hell? But it's like it's not like 40K has 40,000 big hammers in it or something. It's ultimately just a name.
yeah,
So
a
I'm sure
meaningless
it's
it's a meaningless signifier.
yeah, absolutely. Although I would like there to have been trenches in it. I think that would have been kind of fun, but c'est la vie. Um, so those are the things we're looking forward to for next year. Is there
Yeah,
anything
I
else
think
you want to
so.
sort of?
I think so. I mean, I look forward to designing many and better miniature games, and I look forward to you guys joining us on that wonderful pursuit, both here and in the Discord.
Absolutely. There's a handful of games that I'm looking at getting working up at the moment. Okay, so Survivor, Overland, and what might be called something else, but currently Gnome Hike. Those are the things I might end up talking about that I'm currently working on design.
Survivor, Overland, and Gnome Hike.
Yeah, Woverland.
Woverland.
Because it's
Okay.
like Wonderland, but over instead of under.
Ah, okay. Ah, interesting. All right. Well, the things that I imagine I will probably be working on next year that I haven't started working on yet are Precinct 401, Junk Space, and Juggernauts.
Excellent. And I think people should get no further explanation about any of those projects beyond that. Um,
Oh, I am going to work on sump rats at some point as well.
We should, you know, what we should get back to Goblin Sack. Do you remember Goblin
Oh, I
Sack?
don't remember Goblin. Oh yeah,
Mentioned.
yeah. Was that the one where you had to rush around a marketplace, like
We
nicking
meant
stuff?
we talked about Goblin Sack, and you said that's a good name for a metal band. And somebody in the comments demanded that we design it. I might do
All
that
right,
and
we'll
chuck
make
that up on
Goblin Sack
Patreon.
2025.
Yeah, chuck that up on Patreon in the next like 4 to 6 months. Um, if you have opinions about what any of those games we just mentioned by name alone should be or
Or
are,
are desperate to see Glenn's Goblin Sack.
if you want to see my Goblin Sack, go into the comments section, tell us these things and more. Tell us about what you're excited to see in the next 12 months. If there's a video game, a tabletop game, a miniatures game, a board game, a design you're working on that you're excited to experience in the coming year in 2025, tell us all about that. If you're telling us things, tell us more things by hitting the like and subscribe buttons, which will tell us that we are happy and see numbers go big.
As more you informing YouTube that they ought to do something with this video and give it to others.
Yes. Also, I like see numbers go big. Numbers go
He
big good.
does like number go up.
Number go up. And then swing into the down belows and check out the links. There's a link to our Discord where you can come by and ask us about the things we're interested in for next year and working on for next year, and tell us about the things that you're interested in and working on for the next year. You can also swing by our Patreons, back them, and then if Goblin Sack does turn up on one of our patrons, you will have splendid access to the Sacky Goblin. I'm gonna have to design it now. Also, go across to our website, buy the things that we have previously designed and put out and are available on retail.
Yep.
But for now, I think from this episode of Rule of Carnage, it's going to be a thank you and goodbye. So thank
Well,
you.
indeed, from this entire year of Rule of Carnage.
Yes, and from 2024 and from Rule of Carnage, a very happy and splendid, Christmas and festive season to you and yours. And we will see you in 2025, and we'll all get together and do this again in 12 months.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. Have a great one.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye. Bye bye.